Hi, my name is Arthur Zakowitz, and I'm executive editor with WWD. I'd like to welcome you to today's digital event, which is Eyeing the World, how Citizens of Humanity leverages cross-border e-com to boost global sales. We'll be hearing from folks from Citizens of Humanity and from Flow, who's presenting today's session. Before I turn it over to them to do their presentation, just a few reminders. This event is being recorded, and you could see it again. It's available on playback. Share it with your colleagues. I think you'll find it very interesting and in-depth. It's sort of a case study looking at how this technology is being used to kind of make the world smaller, right, and more profitable and with greater sales, and to extend your brand's reach globally. So please, ask questions. We'll go, through the deck, the presentation, and then you can ask questions using the chat function, which is on the left side of your screen. Just drop a question in there, and we'll try to get to it at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to your question, you can reach out to the presenters themselves that have their contact information at the end of the presentation. We'll share that. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Rob Keve, who's the co-founder and CEO of Flow. He'll be presenting with Mario Borroi, who's the CEO of International for Citizens of Humanity. So Rob, take it away.
Thank you very much, Arthur.
Citizens of Humanity. So Rob, take it away.
Thank you very much, Arthur. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Delighted to be here with you today, share a bit about how Flow enables brands to sell globally, and more than delighted to be introducing Mario, who is the CEO of International at Citizens of Humanity. For those who aren't already aware or wearing Citizens of Humanity denim, Citizens of Humanity has been exploded onto the stage as a leader, certainly a thought leader in denim. And everywhere I turn, I see celebrities wearing Citizens of Humanity. I've seen Rihanna, I think Miley Cyrus, Demi Lovato, and many others, and have a huge following across social media with raving fans for the brand. So with that, let me introduce Mario, and then we can talk you through our narrative.
Thank you, Rob. Well, I don't have much to add. Actually, it couldn't be better. But I wanted to thank the WW team and the Flow team because in a very efficient and effective way, they've had to prepare for this webinar, and they made it extremely easy, much easier than I thought. And also, I want to thank the teams that every day behind the scene work in Los Angeles, in Milan, at Flow, which typically being the company dealing with technology as multiple locations, because actually it's very early stages in our partnership, but both teams have been engaging very effectively, and they've been working hard because, of course, you need to work hard to achieve results. I mean, Flow will tell you that everything is very easy. There is some work to do, obviously, and but I mean, it's their work actually every day that allow us to be here and look back to this relatively short time, but also plan for the future. So I want to thank them because their support is very important.
Thank you, Mario. And I see some merchandise in the back. Sharing details on that later. But why don't we kick off and let me introduce Flow. And then more interestingly, we'll hear from Mario about Citizens of Humanity's D2C e-com explosive growth and their story as they launch globally. Flow is a technology platform that enables brands, merchants of all shapes and sizes to sell globally. And the raison d'etre behind Flow was consumers coming to brand sites from all over the world, but finding the experience very hard to transact in. Prices weren't presented in local currency for them. They couldn't see the duties and taxes they would have to pay were they to purchase. Oftentimes shipping was taking too long or too expensive. And even if they managed to navigate all of that, when they get to checkout, many times the payment method that they would want to pay with isn't available, or their card is declined by virtue of them being overseas. So Flow created itself in the image of, what if we could make this simple? Perhaps not always easy. Sometimes there is a bit of effort to set up, which can take a few weeks. But beyond that, what if you could very simply manage the experience for the consumer so that wherever they come from in the world, they see a local site in local currencies with duties and taxes displayed for landed cost, with shipping options available, both cheap and fast on the logistics side. At checkout, if we could surface the top 5 out of 100 different payment methods in each country so that it's very easy to check out and pay for consumers. And then what if that, more than that, we could give brands tools to find the perfect settings by country to optimize for the best conversion rates. And in addition, what if we could give them tools to enable them to advertise across the Google and Facebook portfolios so that they could syndicate their product feeds and drive traffic to their site in the first place. So that's our goal at Flow, empowering brands to enable them to convert the traffic that's probably already hitting their site from overseas into raving fans, just like they have domestically. And we're here to talk about our partnership with Citizens of Humanity. So with that, let me invite Mario to introduce Citizens of Humanity and the second brand in your portfolio.
Yeah. And Citizens of Humanity, as a company, you might be familiar with us, is a company that since the early stages of the LA premium denim has played a key role in this niche of the market. There are a few, I think, remarks which are helpful also then to understand why we made some decisions, how we manage things. One is that we are a vertically integrated company. So since the very beginning, product has been a key element of our strategy, and around that we have built know-how, and then we have finally built also an organization that from the early stages of production carries on all the activities down to distribution globally. Because the other main feature of our company, I would say, but our strategy and our vocation has been to be global. And so I joined the company 10 years ago. The company, while being still young, was already present globally. And I joined to help to build a global presence. And of course, in making make or buy decisions, always try to understand what we do to build assets with a long-term view. And therefore, we've always been in a hunt for talent globally and for understanding and building know-how, which are the two key elements that allow you to manage anything, right? And we have a global strategy. We have, in terms of offer, in terms of what you want to stand for as a company and as individual brands. But we also have been investing quite a lot in building a global presence. Our brands, just to finish this introduction, are Citizens of Humanity, which is the original brand where we started from. And more recently, even though they have a history, but I think it would take too long. A Goldie and Goldsign have been added to our offer portfolio. All of them are created, designed, and strategically developed by us, and in most part also produced internally and distributed globally by our network.
Perfect. Thank you. So today we're going to walk through these 5 questions in quite quick succession so that you have a chance to get what you want out of it with some good takeaways to apply to your own businesses. We are happy to share the deck. Our contact details, Mario's and mine, are on the final slide. So if you can be patient, you'll see it there. And then feel free to reach out to me and happy to oblige. Thank you, Rose, for the question. So the 5 questions that we think most brands are asking themselves, depending on their maturity and stage of evolution in selling in high quantity globally, are why go global in the first place? What are the catalysts for thinking about when you should be going global Is there a right time and what to look out for? What are the points of friction that you face when you go globally? From the market side to the experience side, what do you need to address to ensure that it's flowing smoothly? How do you best optimize these local experiences? What does it look like? And finally, most importantly, is if you do all of that right, what kind of results can you expect? And I think one of the most compelling things that we hope to leave you with is this is not a marginal business case. It's enormous. You're getting enormous site traffic today from international, almost certainly. And equally certainly, you're unlikely to be converting it at a high rate, certainly nothing like your domestic rate. And that contains the opportunity. That's the arbitrage that's sitting in your business today without even marketing to consumers more than you are today. So with that, let's kick off. And I'll invite Mario to tell us about their experience of why to go global.
Yes. And I think early stages, partly because of the nature of the LA premium denim, but being very specific in LA, caught a global audience early stages. So I recall stories I've been told that distributors from around the world were traveling to LA actually to source the product and being able to bring it into their market because it was something unique and distinctive and with a huge potential globally. And it is something unique, distinctive with great potential still now, has maintained this very peculiar, specific positioning and competitive advantage in the market. So we always had the feeling ourselves that there is a global market, There are definitely, and there is an opportunity to sell, therefore, it's a very easy answer, right? But there are then channels and way of selling that are by nature global, and online is one of these, right? And when you start to think about online sales, they are global by definition to some extent. So you need to start to ask yourself, what's happening out there beyond the domestic market. And then there is the idea that, when you do it at a certain point, especially, as I said before, since we wanted to build strong brands, and this is the asset, right? And so we want to give a strong product experience and consistent to consumers. We want them to understand what the brand stands for. You need to be present globally. It cannot be, let's say, too limited, or let me use a word maybe not the best one, but what comes with my limited English is a random experience, right? So you need to ask yourself how you can make sure that there is more to the sales side. There is the side of if you are building an asset, which is a global brand, you need to sell in a certain way. You need to engage in consumer in a certain way. You need to make sure they have an experience which is consistent with your brand. And that's a very strategic asset you can build. Around that you can really develop a healthy business and a mid-long-term approach to your business. So I feel, you need to go global because beyond selling global, you want to make sure your brand is global. And you might decide not to do, and some companies and brands do very well with different approaches. But when you start to engage with certain customers and consumers, or you feel there is an opportunity you can catch, then you have the answer, right? You have to figure out a way to manage, I feel. And that's really, I think, the root of why global and why, I'm sitting here in Milano, and our company, being relatively small, has engaged rather early into investing. And we are still looking nowadays to more opportunities and different ways to do it, because the world is changing pretty quickly. So it's never the way, there are few pillars of our strategy. They are just there because it's us, our culture, our way of doing business. But then, implementation might require that you are flexible enough to review your choices and consider what you do. But in a nutshell, there is an opportunity to sell product globally. But if you want to build a brand, I think you need to think about having a global brand, and therefore you want to manage sales and more globally, right?
Well said.
And that's my idea. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think your point is very well made, particularly about the importance of being intentional about it and not allowing for a random experience. And I would also say on your point about global brand, you can do it intentionally, try to create a global brand, but oftentimes, particularly if you have a 200,000 following on Instagram, as you do, you're a global brand whether you intended it or not. Your followers are all over the world. They're desperate to get hold of the product, and ideally, they'll get it directly from the site. And so brands should think about their social followings as their distributed audience, their distributed customer base, and they're global. And so you can become a global brand even before you intended it.
And then I will recall this later on as well. And I know I've been telling you previously, you can sell globally without making things too complicated, without too many solutions, but it depends then, at the very end, in summary, the customer experience is potentially random. You don't know, you even don't know. So this is the question, I feel.
Yeah. Firstly. Yeah. So just a word maybe on the size of the opportunity, because that answers part of the question why you would want to do it. It is enormous. So I think we often underestimate how large the market is for purchasing cross-border. It's destined to be $1.6 trillion, just B2C cross-border, over the next 4 years. And you'll see on the next slide how fast growing it is. So this is not a marginal market. It's not an extra couple of points on your top line. This has potential to transform your growth because of it not only being a large market today, but actually fast growing. Here you'll see domestic on the top relative to cross-border e-commerce. And whilst cross-border e-commerce is still lower in absolute terms than your domestic commerce, this shows it as about 3-4 times larger. You can see the growth rate in cross-border is outstripping domestic. So over the next decade, we may well come to a point where cross-border is actually a greater opportunity than domestic even. And certainly it's low-hanging fruit today, given the size of the market. Why is cross-border important and why is it growing? I think most of this is obvious. It's the global nature of search. If you're searching for a brand or you're searching for a particular category online or on mobile, you'll find all kinds of brands all over the world. It doesn't distinguish to just your domestic market. If you're a brand like Citizens of Humanity with a big social following on Instagram, on Twitter, on Pinterest, on whatever, your fans, your audience also don't recognize geographic boundaries. If they're a good fit and love your brand, they could equally be in Detroit or Sydney or Jerusalem. And so that creates an opportunity to be able to service those consumers around the globe, particularly if you have a lot of celebrity interest or it's a celebrity brand or influencers behind it, even more so. And then the final two reasons are maybe more supply side reasons. Oftentimes, it's cheaper to acquire customers in other geographies. There's 190 countries out there. There's no reason why they would be the same or more expensive than your domestic market to acquire customers. And that is the case. There's an arbitrage, there's a distribution. Many consumers in these countries will be cheaper to acquire than here in the domestic market. And if you're properly set up to sell globally, they'll be just as easy to reach.
Just as a comment in general, I feel in a global scenario, I think still there are some, constraints into, more global e-commerce, not last trade wars and duties and tariffs that sometimes make things complicated. But in terms of consumers, definitely, of course, we are now in a very special time, so things have changed, and I'm not going to engage in any prediction of the future, obviously, but let's say if to some extent we go back to something similar to what was before, mobility has increased dramatically in the past decades. And so consumers actually do get exposed to brands in various places in the world. And before they might have planned to shop, traveling or other things. But especially if we talk about premium brands or the luxury world, there is a global consumer, regardless of nationality, regardless where they are located, because they're not just not located in one place. They travel, they move, they engage, but they are global. So that's definitely out there. I feel it's been growing and it won't change. I mean, the travel component, again, I'm not able to predict what's going to happen. I read all the forecasts, but
it'll be a
early.
bit
Something will happen
when things are going to go back to normal.
But either through technology or physical travel or anything else, I think the world is global.
Yeah.
So it's still changing in terms of I'm in a position where I've been dealing in the last few years with a lot of the issues in terms of the cross-border and the tariffs and the duties, and it's not necessarily going to be easier in coming years, but and this requires adaptation and makes complex the exercise.
Perfect. Let's come back to some of those great points, Mario, as we talk about the challenges. Let me make the final point on the going global, that when we look at the larger brands, the top 1,500 to 1,000 brands here in the US, 40% of their site traffic is already coming from overseas. So this definitely isn't something for over the next few years. Something may happen today in 2020, today. And if you look at the stats over the past 12 months, over a third of the site traffic, 40%, came from overseas. And those are, as you were saying, Mario, global consumers who are interested in the brand. And if the site experience is clean and approachable, would be potential customers. So unless your e-com split is 60% domestic, 40% international, you're undercapitalizing on the opportunity to convert that international traffic. And that's what we're here to talk about today. On the question of what's the right timing, maybe we could spend a minute or two on this question before we dive into what do you need to do to be able to capitalize on the opportunity.
And I think, as we said, there is an opportunity, right? So it applies to different brands and different companies, different time, right? So this is, for us, it was immediate. For others, might be a bit later for various reasons. But I feel what's more than just the sales opportunity, there are two key elements that also help us to make the decision. One is you feel you're ready and capable to do the exercise, which means you can manage a consumer and walk them through the shopping experience globally, or at least in some geographies. And the rest, in specifically, I'm talking about going global, doing online. And I believe quite of the people who are attending this session are also moving into e-commerce and building experience. You need also to have the sense that you have understood at least the basics of e-commerce. And the more I'm engaged into this and involved, I feel I'm early stages, because there is a lot to learn and it's changing fast. So the two key variables, I would say, of course, there needs to be an opportunity. Very likely there is an opportunity for most of the brands and the companies. You need to feel you're capable. In our specific case, by having we have been talking about prices. We had retail prices for quite a lot of countries. We were managing in detail, and I'm pricing retail, the collection, on several currencies, discussing with local, very experienced salesperson, comparing on the floors and understanding if it makes sense, right? So that's in summary what I feel. You need to feel you are capable and ready, right? And then you need to have developed a sense for e-commerce. If I had to pick an example, well, if you domestically have frequently asked questions that you know how to answer and they are well thought and you feel confident, then potentially you start to have something to use when you go global. If you don't have it, is it too early? Well, it's a difficult judgment call, but you should think about the complexity of being a retailer, which is just domestically a challenge, obviously. Because I have the highest respect for retailers because it's a complicated exercise, and you deal with with end consumers. So, feel capable and have frequently asked questions ready, let's say, in a nutshell. That's what triggered us to move. So we built experience by managing directly our own e-shop domestic in the US. We also built some experience with one international country, UK. And once we understood that we had the basics, we decided to move on next.
Yeah, you make a great point, Mario. Oftentimes, questions around, oftentimes brands launch internationally and then realize that A, the converting rates are still very low because the consumer experience isn't optimized, and B, there's all kinds of blowback on customer service. Oftentimes, consumers being charged duty and taxes on the
Then again, there are very, very smart and fast brands that they might take the challenge, and go ahead and start globally and learn fast. That's you just need to be aware that that's as important as other variables, and be ready for that.
Yeah.
So our strategy has been more a step-by-step approach, but and as you know, at a certain point, we decided to go fast, right? Because it's also something we're going to get next. The point, I think, the little bit of wisdom is there is a lot to learn. So now I'm investing, we are investing, I would invest even more in this side of the business than anything. And be less concerned about other aspects.
Perfect. Thank you, Mario. From Flo's perspective on the question when to go global, if we aggregate the insights across all of our clients, there's a few lessons. One, look at your international traffic, how much international traffic is hitting your site relative to the sales. If there's a big difference, you're getting 40% of your site traffic from overseas, but 5% of your sales, that obviously indicates a large opportunity to correct by improving your customer experience. I think Ali had a great question around why is penetration of cross-border e-com relatively low still? I think that's exactly this point. And the answer is the consumer experience is still so disjointed. When consumers come to these sites, if they're not properly optimized, they're seeing products in the wrong currency. So it's begging questions about what exchange rate, how much is that really in my currency? Duties and taxes are usually not displayed. And that means the consumer is going to have to pay duties and taxes on the doorstep when FedEx, UPS, whomever turn up to deliver their parcel. And they don't even know how much that is. It could be $50, $200. So it's very off-putting to be on a site which is duties unpaid or no display of duties and taxes. Plus, shipping is often expensive. Many times their payment method isn't available. So even if they wanted to convert and purchase, they can't. And then there's just the psychological issue of, would I be able to return this? Can they support me with customer service if I'm in a different country? And that puts off consumers. And I think that goes to Mario's point about it needs to be a properly thought through experience if you want to convert and not just be able to sell it overseas. Two,
there's an interesting question from Benjamin as well that just came through, asking about the differences in pricing and positioning, which is one of the, and yes and no. I mean, it's different. I think over 10 years, the first 3-4 years have been at the company, every pricing round, let's say 4 times a year, used to start with the currency and the foreign exchange. We don't use it anymore. We have defined what you think is the correct price in the various, let's say, continental platforms, and that's our position. So we got to that with a exercise which lasted a few years, right? And we have adjusted very, very few times. I mean, there is a case I can mention has been when Brexit was finally, voted for. There was a shock on GBP, so there was a need to review our positioning there. Ever since, has not changed. So while the currency has been fluctuating, obviously you're able to do it if there will be a point where we do the maths, obviously, behind the scene to understand also if it makes sense financially. But we got to a point where we feel consumers, our global consumers, understand what a product would cost in the US, and if it is an American product made in the US, is potentially more competitive pricing. But what would be, appropriate to pay in Europe in euros, or in UK in GBP, or in Japan? And that's where we stick. We have some price points, some references we work around.
Yeah.
And again, you need to engage with consumers. You need to have good retail partners. You need to understand. So
yeah,
we've moved from discussing euro dollar rate. No, it's
yeah. Let's pick up that point again. Next section we'll talk about pricing, because as you say, there's two ways you could do it. You could do it on exchange rates and then round to a nice clean price, or you can do what Mario was describing, which is price books, where you define price points in the currency regardless of currency fluctuations. And both work. It depends on the brand's positioning and how it wants to approach the market, which is best. So briefly, just to finish up on the reasons why brands are ready to go global: strong demand, international demand. Traffic is a good proxy for that. Diversification, that came up heavily during COVID, where brands were affected by e-com in one country, but other countries which were on less lockdown or had opened up earlier, they were getting good traction. So by being diversified, they got an early lift in sales. If you are selling through other channels, as Mario was talking about earlier, you may have distributors or wholesale arrangements. You're building end consumer awareness in those markets. And so you should be trying to capitalize on that by driving consumers to your direct-to-consumer site. And the final reason we sometimes see is preempting competition. They've got a unique product, but they're worried about competitors springing up. So the earlier you're the incumbent brand in those markets, the more you can use that to your advantage. So let's spend a few minutes talking about the international experience, the challenges of selling globally. Mario, will you talk us through Citizens of Humanity's issues that it had and how it started thinking about solving them?
Well, it's, we claim we have some knowledge and we are already international and global. The point is to manage it appropriately. The operation, cross-border duties, tax, the logistic infrastructure behind selling globally takes time to develop, time and know-how. Time and know-how, which also equals to money. So one of the key challenges, when you're ready, you want to be fast. You want to be there tomorrow. And if you do it by yourself, it takes quite a lot of time. So when I had my first conversation with Rob about our partnership, which was after actually we were already entered into a partnership, it was like, well, if anything, I always said I was the one at the company that was the most the advocate of the make versus the buy, right? But when I looked at the time frame, I had no doubt about moving fast. So everything can be done. It takes time, more than you think. And if you launch before you are 90% okay, then the customer experience is just random. As I say, you can send a parcel anywhere in the world and see what happens, right? Most likely it gets delivered. But, the experience is not necessarily what would make a consumer buy the first time or buy again. And then be happy about the experience. So I feel there are a few other things, complexity, obviously, right? I keep saying the single individual issue you face in selling to South Africa a pair of jeans is not too complicated. But if you want to do global business, it's a very complicated matrix and puzzle. And it takes a lot of time to sort it out. So time, and again, time, I would say. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. As we get some questions, a few questions and then answer the slide. Related to the prior section, we had a question from David about what if a brand is only known in the US? How do you go about building out that awareness? Two things. One, have a look at your site traffic. There are good tools out there like similarweb.com where you can see how much traffic is coming from overseas. Oftentimes brands are surprised what percentage of the traffic is already coming from overseas, even though they were only advertising here in the US. word of mouth and referral spreads overseas quickly. And two, Flow provides tools to integrate into Google and Facebook. So your advertising can very easily be turned on in any country in the world and start building out a fan base through paid marketing or through social channels, and encourage influencer networks and PR to build up that in consumer awareness. It happens much quicker than I think people sometimes think about. Let me touch on the top barriers, and then we come back to Brandy and Laura's questions. Across all of our customers, when we survey the reasons why they struggle to do cross-border without a good solution provider, is shipping being expensive, delivery taking too long, duties and taxes being unknown or too high, issues around exchange rates that Mario was talking about earlier, not knowing how much they're going to be charged, language, particularly at checkout when it's much more sensitive. We address all of these as a service provider, which we're going to come to talk about, as one solution. Currency, duties and taxes, shipping, payments, checkout, languages is all taken care of. And so the conversion rate is therefore higher, and all of these points of friction addressed.
Yes, and to this, I mean, the way we are currently managing in our partnership, the global markets, we virtually sell globally with very few exceptions, is that we manage 5 currencies with retail prices. So consumers just shop at the retail price, because it's where we are also present significantly with our distribution. And we do ship with a fixed shipping cost in most of the countries where we have business. In some other countries, there's a specific calculation because some very, remote or difficult to serve markets. But in most cases, we build a solution where it's a fixed shipping cost and it's a retail price. So they don't have to worry. And between us and Flow, we manage then to do the appropriate filings with authorities, pay for the costs and clear all the customs and issues and be compliant. So this is really how we serve the market globally. I can mention there was also a question about warehouses and platforms. We do leverage our wholesale infrastructure. So we have a presence in Europe, we have a presence in the US, and we use both, which makes things to some extent easier. For the Benjamin question, I think you have to think that there could be a test with a not optimal logistics setup, provided the customer experience is perfect, because retail margin, especially if you're a wholesale operator, is big. So you can decide to spend some money, some additional money into, fulfilling orders from, like a location which is remote or more expensive. So I would definitely think about this trade-off before engaging into a big, structural organization. So you can decide to play with some of your additional margin, and you can do it for free. I mean, if the world is complicated and there are barriers, you might be required to have a complicated organization. But early stages, I rather keep it simple and decide, to allocate part of my profit, compensate for a simpler solution, right? And of course, you need to do the maths, right? We already started with a fairly articulated structure. I'm not calling it complicated, which help us to be, faster and more effective. It was a challenge to Flow, as we know, right? So we have helped them to develop, a more flexible solution, if you want, but beneficial because mostly of trade barriers between Europe and the US.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Mario. Let me cover the 5 aspects to Flow and then come back to some of those questions. So Flow is a turnkey solution that sits on top of your existing e-com platform. So whether you're on proprietary platform or Magento or Salesforce Commerce Cloud or whatever, we sit on top of that and make sure that all of your pricing displays in local currency, either keying off of an exchange rate and then applying rounding rules, or price books, which you can define, and then the consumer simply purchases at that fixed price in the currency. We manage catalog targeting so that on Flow, you can decide what part of your catalog you sell to which countries. We calculate and classify all the products to determine duties and taxes and manage the remittance of duties and taxes globally on behalf of our clients. At checkout, we integrate 75 different payment methods, so the top 5 can be presented in every country to maximize conversion rate, as well as managing fraud. And on shipping, we integrate into many different shippers to offer cheaper international shipping and fast, so we can go direct from clients' distribution centers. And to, I think it was Brandy's question around distribution, some brands, Flow is built to be globally inventory aware. So if you have DCs around the world, we can pick from the right distribution center to service consumers, either to make sure it's the quickest or the cheapest. So Citizens of Humanity has 2, and so we'll be drawing from the right one for each consumer experience. As to when the right time is to think about local warehouses, if it's just on the basis of economics, the answer is you have to be quite large, hundreds of millions in GMV, before you'll find an economic payback on savings on shipping or duties to warrant having local warehousing. If you're doing it for other reasons, you already have inventory in one country, or you want the customer experience to be one-day delivery, then you may want to do it earlier. But usually shipping cross-border from even one DC globally works for most brands of most sizes.
Yeah. There was an interesting question on language we didn't touch upon. In our specific case, we've been thinking about this a lot, and we heard a lot of different opinions. We decided to have a shopping experience mostly in English, but then a checkout experience which is localized through Flow. So that's a choice. I think is, you need to make a judgment call on how your consumers are. Some people I consider very knowledgeable told me all the time, you need to be local. Don't underestimate that your consumer would prefer. Language, though, is a critical choice for products like ours, where you need to do a description of the product, which is very important for people to understand how the product would fit, the product would be. So we rather prefer to have a shopping experience in English, which on denim is kind of something people would expect, right? And then I would consider, I would be very careful any other language than English, obviously. Yeah. English so far has proven to be good. Then, of course, down the road, we might decide to move and become more sophisticated.
I think your approach, Mario, what we see that it's such a big opportunity to be cross-border, go live. Don't worry too much about language. Start off capitalizing on the opportunity. Many consumers use Google Translate if there's anything that they really need to translate. And then over time, you can decide, is there another language that there's a payback on to have converted? We do find at checkout, the local language is more important, because there you're getting into questions around payments or fraud or privacy questions. And so, as Mario said, we translate that on behalf of our clients into many, many different languages, so that at the very least, checkout can be converted into local language. It's a great question. I think it's also worth touching on, I think it was Laura's question around legal. How can we help brands on the legal side? So there's all different questions that get addressed when you think about international, from are you correctly remitting duties and taxes? And that varies a lot by country. Some countries you can do it at the border. Others you need to be registered, like in Australia, New Zealand, Switzerland, Norway. Yes, Flow takes care of that. Other questions around privacy policies, GDPR, and things like that. Flow also plays a role in making sure that data is managed according to the EU in that case. And still other areas like brand protection, our GC will work with our clients to make sure that they can navigate their way through any questions like that. But those questions come up often, and we are well suited to help brands navigate through them.
And in our specific case, just very quickly, because I know we need to be quick now through the remaining slides to leave some time. There are a lot of interesting questions I see coming through. Is that we were already well organized in terms of trademark or anything, but of course we've leveraged now a lot of Flow to help us, on this. So it can be handled. It's not the main constraint.
Yeah, thank you. So as we answer more questions, Mario, I think the punchline is, what are the results? What are the results you're hoping for? Has the effort you've been investing with us been worth it?
Yeah, and in thinking about what results to share, I said, why at the beginning you think about sales, right? And then after working on it for a while, and we said, well, no. And why not sales results? Because I think it's too specific. But there are other important sides of the story, which I think is interesting for all of our, for all the people who are listening to us tonight. And I think is timing. I was thinking it will take 6 months, right? We want to start immediately. I don't want to wait 6-9 months to do it ourselves. So let's partner with Flow. And then I said it will take 6 months. And we are through this now 4 months, 3.5 months when I was looking at the figures, right? And I would say we already reached our target. And you immediately go global, because the solution then, the rest of the growth comes from driving traffic and converting, right? But it's not that it takes time. It's rather immediate. To some extent, to my surprise, right? Because I was looking at this chart and I was saying, oh, I'm like, we are there, right? And even before the 3.5 months, to be honest, like if I look at the curve, and even in discussing with the Flow team, they were saying, but how you see the growth? I said, well, at the very beginning, I saw the growth. Now is the next step, right? And also already addressing some of the question, we are not yet there in terms of the marketing side of the story, in terms of leveraging more globally. Frankly, so it's the next step, because we've been 3.5 months through this, and we've focused on having consumers who find us and want us. They need to have the perfect shopping experience. Then we move into the next step. It's very fast. I was impressed and overwhelmed at the beginning, and there is a person attending to this webinar who will be smiling because she's been overwhelmed, actually more than me, by the level and the quantity of the direct-to-consumer interactions generated by being global. A lot of questions about the product, a lot of questions about the brand, a lot of engaging, some complaints, obviously. We shouldn't be naive and think that everything goes perfect, but a lot of interaction. So we went, compared to the experience we had in the UK, which lasted some time, and it was a very consumer-focused experience. People were calling the office in London, and they were knowing the name of a person who would give them answers, which is unique, I think, in e-commerce. Well, we went 11 times higher in numbers almost immediately. Just a number impresses me. So think about it from the two sides, that there's a huge opportunity, and the side of you need to manage it. And it can be an experience that makes people happy, and is not. There is no disruption into the flow of product, and returns are possible. Our policy has been adapted over time, even during this short time, to understand better what works well globally. We have a global policy. It's not designed on the specific countries, of course, compliant with any strict policy. But so far, we have experienced a lower return rate than domestic, and so there is not, the shopping experience has been positive to this extent. Then can it be that it's too difficult to return? Well, I don't think so. We don't know, because especially when I look at European Union and Europe, where there are some countries with heavy return rates, it's not difficult to return. I just feel the shopping experience has been appropriate so far. I think these are the results which probably are interesting, and maybe surprisingly enough, we are not talking about sales, but I think these points might make people think about other aspects of the business, and that might be interesting to consider.
Great, thank you, Mario. And I think the important point you make is just about revenue. I'm going to come on to show great results across our client base, and we've got many other webinars with other clients talking about revenue and how they've experienced doubling, trebling sales working with Flow. But it isn't just revenue. We measure ourselves on improving our clients' sales conversion rate, and we're completely aligned with our clients in making sure that we can have dramatic impact on that. That's a crucial measure. But as you indicate, it's also about just the lifetime value of customers. So sure, you got the first repeat purchase at a higher rate, but what about the repeat purchase frequency? How will that trend over time? Can we make these long-time buying customers and not one-offs? Are returns going down? As you mentioned, are they lower than you would have expected? What about refunds? What about calls into customer service with questions around currency or shipping or duties and taxes? I think all of these should go down if you're managing the customer experience cohesively. And that's our goal at Flow, to make it simple and easy to manage that customer experience. So you're not only getting a boost in conversion rate and hence revenue, but actually the lifetime value of the customer is protected and growing. With that, let me just click through a few slides just to demonstrate how other clients have also experienced an ROI on their investment. Flow is a subscription business, so the cost of it is tiny relative to the upside of growing the business. MC Wallace have talked about, in the case study, I think even higher than this, but in this slide, 80% growth in international sales and enormous savings on the shipping side. Outerknown, also a fabulous brand. Kelly Slater, the surfers' founding brand, have experienced more than double their sales on an annual basis, which Travis Heard, their COO, talked about in a webinar recently. Charles & Covard, triple their international sales working with us in the jewelry sector. And it's worth saying our clients span all kinds of different categories, from denim, obviously, but through to luxury, through to other forms of apparel, health and beauty, jewelry, specialty items. Cross-border works well for almost any category you could imagine. And actually, just a word on the results we've seen in the as compared to last year. Our clients are up 135% relative to last year. So on average, across all of our clients, they're more than doubled their sales. One thing I didn't touch on before is on Flow, clients are able to A/B test all kinds of different configurations. So our client success team lean into our clients and on a very regular basis are running tests on their behalf or showing them how to. And you can test all kinds of different things. So we've got a playbook of how can you improve your conversion rate to these levels. And oftentimes it's things like trying different rounding on pricing, try including sales tax or duties before rounding versus excluding, trying different payment methods, different messaging, different promotions, different shipping tier promotions. We've got a deep playbook of what's worked well for many different clients in different countries. And any one of those tests could give you a 40% lift in conversion. And so we see it as our job to surface best practice to the brands so we can layer on these tests and make sure that they're getting the lift that they want. Mario, I know we're still getting many questions coming in, and I think you wanted to be able to summarize some of your final thoughts. So let me hand it back to you.
Yes, there is something I keep saying to Rob. I know he doesn't like it. I'm not even wondering. No, but and there is a good reason for that. That one way to look at it is that you should forget about Flow if it works well, right? And to some extent, it's true to the extent that Flow helps you to have this, let's say, the basics of the business, the customer experience working well. And we are at this stage so far, and it's true that there is more to that, and we are going to test our partnership in engaging into what Rob has just mentioned. And I feel there is an enormous value in being able to focus on the second part of the story, right? On really understanding your business and managing your business. What we are learning, we are arrogant enough to think that we know a lot about our business when it comes to creating incredible product and branding. And producing, making, and then selling to wholesale. We're learning a lot about this new world. We've learned, as I said before, domestically before even engaging in international. There is still a lot to learn, and it's changing very fast. So one of the things you need to look at, you can't do everything, and we have decided very clearly to focus our energy on the second part of the story. Not really in the first 3-4 months of this adventure, because you need to start. But the final thought is that's key, So being able to focus on that with a partner that helps you to deal with the rest effectively and can be a partner also down the road is the challenge, but it's also the opportunity.
Thank you.
This will be my final remark.
Hey, Rob,
in this discussion, the opportunity of cross-border, which we looked at all the numbers earlier, is enormous in trillions of dollars, fast growing, and in traffic terms is at least 40% of many brands' site traffic. And on the other hand, there's so many complexities to selling international. And it's key for the consumer that it's a simple, easy, streamlined customer experience if you want them to purchase and repeat purchase. And from Flow side, we want it to be simple for the merchant. We want to hide all the complexity and manage it either through automation on the platform. And there was a question around returns. Yes, we manage returns as well. Or through our client success team in the background, managing things on behalf of our client. So I think Mario's point about a good cross-border vendor is one that you don't even notice is there, except when you're testing different growth strategies, I think is fair. I think that should be our goal, that it becomes simple and we are fueling your international growth by keeping all this complexity under wraps and managing on behalf of our partners.
Rob, thank you so much, Mario. We only have just a couple of minutes, so I don't know if it's worthwhile, maybe grabbing a question or two. Rob, you want to go through the queue and take a look and maybe answer one or two? Mario, I have a question though. Is sizing ever an issue? Sizing and fit when you're looking at other markets?
Well, it is definitely an issue. Let's say we've decided our collection is global, so we do not have like a localized collection, which would be a choice. We feel for our brand, for our consumers, it needs to be global. There is no real adaptation of product. There is definitely product more suited to certain geographies than others. There is a little bit of adjustment. You might add smaller size for Asia, for instance, right? Other categories, close to ours have requirements to have different product, But in our specific case, it's a choice. We are global in terms of collection and product.
Great. Rob, do you see any questions?
Yeah. We've answered a lot of them, Arthur. Yep. I think let's pick off a few others. For brands that are already cross-border, Carol is asking, brands that are already global in nature, how do they think about cross-border, and questions around profit sharing. So many of our brands are very large brands that have distribution arrangements already in different countries, may have local sites, may have local management teams. And one of the considerations for them is how do we make sure our direct-to-consumer site complements those channels and doesn't create channel conflict? And then maybe behind the scenes, how do we attribute some of those sales to their P&L? So we have deep experience of working with that, making sure prices are in sync across channels in different countries, usually through price books, as opposed to dynamic pricing, which uses the exchange rate, and then helping provide the data feeds on everything at Flow, not just to be able to allocate the sales, but every single transaction, every single order has a data feed, which is viewable on Flow and feeds back into our client system so they can see it just like with domestic transactions.
Rob, you mentioned the A/B testing, and I know we didn't have enough time to get into that, but is that something that you would consider market by market, or is it more product based?
No, it's market by market. And it's essential because when we say cross-border and international, it sounds like it's one thing, but really it's a heterogeneous market of 200 different markets. And so what's right in France isn't necessarily right in Australia, let alone Canada, let alone UK. So the A/B testing tool at Flow is deep stack. You can test all kinds of things, not just at the content layer, but on pricing, on price elasticity, at checkout, or at shipping. And our client success team can set those up and say, here are the top 5 tests in each country. Just press this button and they'll automatically start running. And those end up being the fuel behind their growth, peeling away those onion layers to get 20, 30% lift each time they test something new.
I think, Rob, I think we could grab just one more question. We're out of time, but let's why don't you pick one and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. I think one question relates to how quickly can you be live? And so that's a crucial question. It sounds compelling, but is it simple? And the answer is it can be simple. clients are live on Flow within weeks. Range is maybe 2 to 6, 7 weeks. It doesn't take long. It's a simple integration designed to be simple. We do want to work closely as a project partner to make sure that all considerations are thought through. Mario touched on a few, sometimes related to taxes, so that when you go live, it doesn't need to be touched again. We can drift into the background and everything can be managed from the console, and the client success team can just talk to you about how to grow the business from there. So lean in, please reach out to either Mario or I. Our contact details are here, and I think we'd be delighted to help you.
Well, thank you so much, Mario and Rob. This is really eye-opening, and I think the opportunity is huge. I want to thank everybody, and I want to thank Flow for presenting today's webinar. Thank you again, and have a great day.